Okay, I have to make an immediate disclaimer. This is not another presentation on DNA and Book of Mormon, so you don't have to leave the room. Also, I noticed there are a lot of people in the audience that speak Italian, so if you don't like the accent, we can do it in Italian. How many of you speak Italian? Look how many hands. Good. So we should do we can do it with an accent or we can do it in Italian. I am very pleased to be here today. I like the purpose of my presentation is basically to summarize the last 10 years of kind of looking into the prophet genes. Some of the material, about 50% of this presentation, has been presented elsewhere before or published, and but I've been asked to kind of, represent it and polish it a little bit, updated. And so bear with me if you already heard some of this information before. And the rest of the presentation will present some novel information regarding some of the things that I feel I learned from the prophet genes, and that might shed some light about, particularly about his ancestry and where he came from. So basically, what I like to impress in your mind, and as a question that was asked of me before I even came up here and spoke to speak to you, was how accurate can DNA be used for ancestry? And what I like to impress on your mind is that DNA is not an instrument to replace or substitute information that could be obtained elsewhere, but it does add a level of understanding, it does add a level of truth, and increase the level of confidence based on a context that you might have. So basically, you might have a genealogical or historical question, an hypothesis, or some rumors that you like to test, and DNA might come handy in that situation. Rarely you just take DNA alone and that provides the answer you want to. So this is kind of like the approach I took with regards of studying the prophet Joseph Smith's life. Everything kind of started back in 1999, 2000, when I first began working with Professor Scott Woodward as a student at BYU, and continued to this day my association with him. And we learned at that time, there were a couple of things that kind of led us to Joseph Smith. Number one, we were about to begin a large study that where we wanted to build a database basically that contained both genealogical and genetic data. We want to be able to use DNA to assist people with their genealogical research, and in order to do that we have to kind of calibrate the system, and what a better place than Utah to do so, where you have extended families with good genealogies and multiple individuals that you could ask for a DNA sample and kind of use as guinea pigs to calibrate the whole system. And the Smith family was definitely one of them. Hiram Smith alone has about 15,000 living descendants here in Utah. So that's try to go to a couple of those reunions and get people to give me a DNA sample. And as I did so, I learned an interesting thing that was earlier on, that Joseph Smith, who taught us how important it is to do family history and genealogy, he had a brick wall, maybe probably more than once, but at least he had a genealogical brick wall right in his genealogy, in which the ancestry, the paternal line of his family, the Smith line, cannot really be traced with certainty. And there is an article that was written in 1991 by Elaine Nichols, who was the Smith specialist, the Smith genealogist, and it seems like at that time there was no one that knew as much as the Smith genealogy as she did. And basically, in her conclusion was that the genealogical data that we have about a possible English origin of Robert Smith, who is the ancestor of Joseph Smith Sr. and Joseph Smith Jr., is very sketchy and cannot be used for confidence. So basically we're only confident all the way to Robert Smith, possibly born in 1626, who showed up in New England, in Boston, Massachusetts, in 1638 as an indentured servant to another man. So think about this detail, because we'll bring it up again later on, but the fact that we have a 12-year-old boy without siblings, without parents, working for somebody else as an indentured servant in Boston. Okay, kind of an unusual situation, if you will, maybe common at that time, but definitely something worth looking at closer. Now, at that time we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we can reconstruct the Joseph Smith genetic signature, the paternal line signature that we have here, and then somehow, as we do this project, this large project that we want to do, collect DNA samples from Smith in England, particularly in the area where we think this boy came from, see if we find similar genetic signatures there, and perhaps bridge the gap between the Utah or Mormon Smith and those in England, and for find a way to bridge this genealogical gap using DNA. And I want you, I'll try to stay away from too much biology jargon. Kind of late and you're probably tired, so genealogy, biology, two things that are going to get you to sleep right away, right? But there are a couple of things you kind of need to understand. And so here for this type of work, we were looking at a particular marker that is passed from father to son. So only males have this marker, and is only inherited along the paternal line. And so our idea was, there is a marker here that follows exactly the surname line. So we know something about the genealogy. Here it is. And we can possibly reconstruct this marker using living descendants of the Smith family, and then use this marker to look for Joseph Smith ancestry in England. So it will be a Joseph Smith Jr. paternal lineage marker, basically. It's called the Y chromosome. We look a little bit at Joseph Smith posterity, see if there were living, what we were looking at were direct male descendants and broken paternal lines. So basically we're looking for 2 or 3 Smith individuals who share Joseph Smith as the most recent common ancestor. That's what MRCA stands for. And if I could get the DNA of a male individual Smith with an unbroken line to Joseph Smith, and then from possibly a sibling, not Joseph Smith, but another son, and compare the two, and the marker would be the same, then I would have identified also Joseph Smith Jr. marker without having to test his blood or his bones or his hair or anything. I would have that type of information. And likely we found some individuals that met this. This wasn't very easy because although Joseph Smith had something like 11 children, only 4 grew up to adulthood and had children. And basically there are almost 2.5 of these lines that are still have descendants today. So not a lot. I mean, there are about 300 descendants of him, but only basically you can trace them from 2 of these sons. Alexander Hertzsmith, who was an apostle in the Reorganized Church, and Joseph Smith III was the first president of the Reorganized Church. And we have these 2 descendants. This is their DNA. This is the marker that I was telling you about for individual 1 and individual 2. We compared all the values, all the DNA markers that we got for this particular profile we wanted to build, and we found they were identical, which was exactly what we were hoping for. There are instances in which, although you have genealogical data that seems to point, that the DNA of the 2 individuals should be the same, because of an undocumented adoption or an illegitimacy, you have the right genealogy but the wrong DNA. It's called the milkman syndrome. Okay? We talk about syndrome today, right? Earlier on. So, luckily there was not such syndrome here with this case, and the 2 individuals had identical DNA markers, and because the most recent common ancestor, meaning the person that tied in the soonest in their genealogy on the paternal line is Joseph Smith Jr., then we can confidently infer that this is also Joseph Smith DNA. If I would have Joseph Smith standing by me, and I'll be able to swab him and get some DNA from